This is the reading quiz 645 through 655, the end of chapter 22, picking up with our rivalry with Japan and Russia. At the beginning of the 20th century, Japan and Russia are deeply involved in Asian politics and who can get what on the other one. And we aren't as involved. It's farther away. It's closer for, obviously, Japan and the Soviet Union. So war breaks out in 1904 over Manchuria, between Russia and the Japanese, and we support Japan. But Roosevelt, being the great negotiator that he is able to negotiate the Treaty of Portsmouth to end the war, but it brings about Japan's emergence as a major power, and Roosevelt becomes the first president to win the Presidential Medal of Honor. But tensions grow between Japan and the United States due to the fact that Japanese students in California were being sent to segregated schools. And of course, the Japanese don't like this. So Roosevelt makes an agreement with the Japanese that they will be not taken to other schools, the Japanese Americans, as long as they limit their immigration into the United States to what it was at the turn of the century, 1900. So this will slow down the Japanese encroachment, for lack of a better term, into the United States. It is what it is, not a perfect solution, but the Japanese and us stay on rocky, uneven terms. In Latin America, there's no major power challenging the Americans' objectives, so we're going to do what we want. And we're really successful in exercising imperial control there. And you can see on this map all the different places that we go into and make some sort of mark. And they're all listed there. Some of the major things: Puerto Rico, of course, we annex it following the Spanish-American War. We had mixed results. Transportation and sanitation are improved. Greatly. Public health and education are developed. They're becoming more modern, or modern for that time. But Puerto Ricans had their political freedoms curtailed. They don't get to run their country the way they want to. However, in 1917, they're granted U.S. citizenship and other rights. Puerto Ricans are lucky in the fact that they will never be attacked by anybody because they're a possession of the United States. They don't pay taxes. They are citizens of the United States. They can travel freely in the United States. But they can't vote. They're not a state. And a lot of the bonuses they have would be taken away from them if they became a state. So it's always the question whether or not Puerto Rico needs to become a state or not. But good things happen when we annex them, but also some bad things are brought about. The Teller Amendment was signed when we went to war with the Spanish in Cuba, which said we would not annex Cuba, and that we're fighting for their freedom. Well, we make an amendment to the Teller Amendment, which is the Platt Amendment, which restricts Cuba's autonomy. So they can't be their own selves. We are still going to have Guantanamo Bay, our little carved out military base there. And it also authorized the United States to intervene to maintain order in Cuba at any point in time, whenever we deemed it necessary. When this happens, American businesses start investing heavily in Cuba, because if something bad happens, the United States is going to come in. Now, it's still a foreign country, but the United States is going to take care of any kind of problems that may come about. This is huge. here are our other interventions. We're going to talk about one more at least, but we're going to, well, more than one, but here are all the ones that are talked about in this chapter. I would suggest knowing the ones that we discuss. All right, so due to the Spanish-American War, our interest in a canal through Central America is super important to us because at this point, it's like something like 15,000 miles to go all the way around South America to get from New York to California. So we need something that will cut that time. And the French had tried to build a canal in Panama. They were unsuccessful. We try to buy that, and the Colombians, who own the Panama region at this point, don't want us to do that. So we actually have a second option, which is a land-level canal in Nicaragua, but it's much longer. And so Roosevelt boldly, through intermediaries, tells the group that is living in this Colombian region, the Panamanians, that they will coordinate a revolt against Colombia, train them, provide them with weapons, as long as when Panama becomes its own country, the United States will be able to build the Panama Canal. So that does happen, and construction of the Panama Canal starts in 1904. It's not completed while Roosevelt's president, but he gets the moniker of he's the one that started it. But it's finished in 1914, which is actually kind of huge because that is obviously right around the time of World War I starting. So Panama Canal is open. We lease it from them. We give them $1 million a year to lease it from them. Everybody pays a tax or a toll to use it except for us, and our military ships have right of way through the canal zone. So it's kind of interesting. All right, so we know the Monroe Doctrine said that we are the police force in the Western Hemisphere. No more colonizing by European countries, and we take care of everything. Well, all three of the progressive presidents, Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson, add something on to this. Roosevelt's is known as the Roosevelt Corollary, and he uses this to justify intervention and give us authority in Latin America. So why we're able to go into all these countries is because of what Roosevelt deems the Roosevelt Corollary. And Latin Americans resent those claims to that unilateral authority chosen by Roosevelt. Now, Roosevelt at this point decides that Alfred T. Mahan's plan of modernizing the Navy is what he needs to do. So he builds a whole new Navy, basically. And he takes the stuff that we weren't using anymore, leaves all the technology on it, leaves everything on it, paints it white, sails it around the world, and calls it his Great White Fleet. And basically he's showing off, saying, we're sailing this from Washington, D.C. around the world. Everybody come look at it. When it gets to California, we're decommissioning these ships and pulling them out of the water because we have stuff that's better. The stuff that you're seeing is better than the stuff that you have, and of course we have stuff that's even better because we're letting you see what we're getting rid of. He had a famous saying of speak softly and carry a big stick. Well, this is completely not true because, as we know, Roosevelt doesn't speak softly. Okay, and he doesn't literally carry a big stick around. But it's an analogy for his Navy. His Navy is his big stick. Anybody want to mess with us? I'll pull out my Navy, my big stick, and whoop your butt. Okay, so Roosevelt is brash and emboldened and uses the Roosevelt Corollary as well. Taft uses what's called dollar diplomacy, and the Latin Americans hate this. They call this dollars for bullets. And his government policy focused on using private American interests to replace European interests. So if something happens in the country, Taft will send the military in or American businesses in to stabilize and increase profits for the Americans that are already there. And if you want protection, you have to give over vital industries like your railroad, your banking, your electric, whatever it may be, your oil producing, to the United States until you pay off what it costs us to be there. And so we are taking away from those countries that are unstable. We're taking advantage of them. Not fair, but what are they going to do about it? This is President Moscoso in 1999 when we give back the canal zone back to the Panamanians. We still have, our military ships still have right of way in the canal zone. Here's that speak softly and carry a big stick thing I was talking about, the cartoon. Pretty cool. All right, Wilson says that he's not going to be an interventionist, but he becomes the most interventionist president in American history. Not by choice, it's just by what ends up happening in the world at this time. He wants to expand U.S. dominance of the Caribbean and expand economic interests. He uses a racist attitude towards Latin American inferiority, and he intervenes in Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and Cuba in these regards, that they're inferior, they need our help, we're stepping in. Now, Wilson also becomes embroiled in the Mexican Revolution and eventually orders American troops there. So there's a revolt that happens, or a coup that happens in Mexico. But because this coup ends up happening by force, Wilson does not want to support it. And then it goes back and forth and back and forth. And Pancho Villa ends up fighting for, it's between Huerta and Carranza, and it is just a mess. Pancho Villa ends up going on the run. We put all of our troops under, we put a bunch of troops under U.S. control at the border to try to find him, and we never find him because he's hiding out inside the United States. John J. Pershing, who will lead the American forces in World War I, is there trying to find Pancho Villa, and he can't find him. It's crazy. Okay. And Wilson just should have just stayed out of it. And here, this cartoon shows like the white man's burden of Wilson intervening in Mexico and elsewhere in Latin America. The United States also took a large role in European politics, even though we're supposed to stay out of it due to the Monroe Doctrine. We've been non-involvement, which remained popular with Americans, and we need to act on restraint on U.S. activity, as we always have said. But Americans intervene cautiously through international conferences and treaties and slowly dabble our foot back into European affairs. It's a good thing we've done a little bit of dabbling, because when World War I starts, they're going to need us. And that is the end of chapter 22 and the reading section 645 through 655.